Brett here and
Dr. Cameron.
all right, and we're going to talk to you guys a little bit today about a question that gets brought up a ton of times with parents that come in the office is, what about getting my kid adjusted? And I'm sure you hear it probably every single day.
Yep, quite a few of them.
The big thing to understand with this is that people typically don't think it's something that's like normal necessarily until they see it. And then they start asking questions because they want to know why, and they want to understand like, okay, what's the difference between me as an adult versus my child? And I know Dr. Cameron's got a couple kids, I've got a couple kids. Our kids have been exposed to chiropractic from the start because we understand the benefits of it. We understand the lack of risk with it. That's a big question people have, and we can probably kind of touch on here is that there's a lot of fears and concerns over kids that in terms of what we're doing. First and foremost, what we're doing with children is very light and very simple with it. It's the pressure of your fingers, for example, just gently working on stuff up in their neck. What we see with an adult is very different than a child, first and foremost. Even the stuff we do with adult is very simple, very safe, very effective with it, and the risk is very, very minimal. I always say is the best way to understand a risk from a chiropractic adjustment is to ask the doctor, what's your malpractice insurance premiums cost? I pay less than $1,200 a year for malpractice insurance because chiropractors don't create problems. That's first and foremost. So that fear piece, I know it's strange, I know it's different. Anything out of the norm is usually a little bit scary for people. But there's a ton of kids that get adjusted. Millions and millions of kids every year get adjusted in the United States without problems. So let that be, hopefully put you at ease in regards to that part of it. The next question we get a lot is like, why? Why is a kid here to begin with? I mean, people always have that question of like, why would they bring a newborn in here? Well, it's very simple. Like what we're doing is not about back pain and neck pain with children. It's about nervous system and how the nervous system functions in regards to overall health. And your spine protects that nervous system, and from day one you get yanked out by your head, which causes trauma to your spinal cord, which affects your overall body's ability to be healthy and to develop properly. I want my kids to be as healthy as possible, and I want them to develop the way they're supposed to. Those are the two reasons why our children are checked fairly consistently for spinal issues to make sure they're good. So I'm going to throw it over to Dr. Cameron here to kind of explain a little bit of like what you really start to look for with a kid.
Yeah, because ultimately an infant, and you know any kid really under 2 doesn't really have a good way of explaining what's wrong with them, why they're having an issue. A lot of times they just cry, right? And so for one of the biggest signs is a colicky baby. You know, a colicky baby is any baby that's crying for 3 or more hours a day. You know that something's affecting them, something's not right with that baby, and it's probably some sort of tension in the spine and the nervous system. So that's number one thing we're going to get babies in our office for. Obviously, some head tilt, some of the postural things that mom and dad are going to see, those are important signs as well. You know, if you got a baby and you have him or her in the crib or in the stroller or anything, and their head's always to one side, there's probably something that you're going to want the chiropractor to look at to see if there's something they can do to help with that, or if it's creating some bigger problems down the road, because that can lead to some issues there. As well as another big one would be earaches, ear infections, those types of things. Those bring a lot of kiddos into our office.
Even that kids tugging on an ear or itching at it all the time is a good sign.
Oh yeah, that's something too that you're going to want to have your kid evaluated for, as well as when they go to the pediatrician, come to the chiropractor as well. Other things would be constipation. So if a baby's not going regular, there's something wrong. Whether that's they need some probiotics, whether that's they need some special massage work that we actually do in through there, or some techniques we can teach the parents to do really at home, as well as the stuff we do chiropractically adjusting, things like that. That all helps with some of those things. There's lots of signs and symptoms that you should bring your baby in. One of the other things that is more for the infants is nursing. So sometimes moms are wondering why a baby isn't latching, why they're not feeding on one side versus the other, and they think it's something that they're doing. Well, sometimes it's maybe the baby doesn't want to turn one way, or is having some pain with doing something like that. So that's another sign, as well as arching their back. So if you put the baby down and they're crying and they're arching their back and moving around all the time and they don't look comfortable, it's probably because they're not, and it's probably because they need to have a chiropractor look at them and just see if there's something we can do to make them more comfortable. So those are some of the basic things. I don't know if there's anything else to add, but very, very common things we're going to see that would bring a baby into our office.
So when that child comes in then and the parent's like, hey, you know what? I noticed this. I know the head tilt here. I know it's tugging on the ear, or they've just been really fussy lately, or they haven't been sleeping as well as they normally do. Like, what are you going to look at? Like, what's some of the indicators that you look at then to say, okay, here's what we need to do with this kid?
Yeah, so there's, as well as, there's lots of different things we do with adults that we can do with kids, but there's a few things we can't do, which is ask the kids questions. So one of the big things I'm assessing is I'm asking mom and dad what's going on. What are some of the things they may be noticing that they even brought them in for the first place, the signs and symptoms, as well as leg length. We got that. We got hair pattern. So that's something that people don't really even often think about. If you got a baby that's kind of got a patch here where it maybe seems a little worn down, a little thinner, it's because they're favoring that. They want to be there. That's rubbing a little bit more often, and that can create obviously a different shape as well, even in through there. So those are some of the things that we're assessing in through there. Is there things that you look at on top of that you'd be doing?
Yeah, sometimes like even having a child walk a little bit, you notice different gait patterns that have happened over a period of time. They kind of drag their leg, or their stride is shorter on one side versus the other. When you lay them down on the table and when you look at them and one foot flares out more than the other foot, it gives you an idea of kind of what their pelvis is doing. You see a kid and they're standing and all of a sudden the shoulder tilts on one side. And you mentioned that the head tilt or the rotation with it, or when they turn one way, they won't turn all the way that way. And we really get specific with it is we actually just kind of go through and check each individual segment in there, like what moves and what doesn't move properly through there. When we find the things that don't move well and we take care of those, we adjust those areas, and all of a sudden that body's working the way it's supposed to again. That spine's working together versus when it breaks out into segmental sectional areas that cause a lot of stress in the soft tissue, and that's when a child starts to complain about certain things, or they start adapting what they're doing to that end of it. So real simple checks we do: leg length checks, check balance, movement checks, like segmental specific checks, gait checks, and like you said, just the questioning of a child or a parent. Like, you as a parent know already if something's going on.
There's the mom's intuition, the dad's intuition. You know if there's something not right with your kid, and that could be a reason to bring them in. As well as, at some point they're going to be able to complain a little bit. So they're going to let you know, and some kids complain more than others, but like I said, that intuition of knowing something's not right with my kid, that's a good indication as well.
So we're going to give you guys a quick little example with my youngest child, actually, in terms of like what we do with the child, so you kind of have a feel for what's a pediatric chiropractic visit actually look like on there. So stay tuned here. Hey, it's Dr. Brett here. I'm going to show you guys quick the simple things we do with small children. This is my youngest son, Cam, here. He's 18 months, and this will be very similar to what we do with any child that comes in here. We talked about, we do go through certain checks with them to find out what's good and what's not good with them. We'll check some movement with them on here. So I'm just simple motion up in his neck through here on there. We'll even look at like shoulder height differences from one side to the other. And again, with kids, there's certain things you can see clearly. There's other things that are a little more of a challenge because they're not going to sit there and completely comply. So we'll put kids down on a table then, like this, and even look at like leg length differences in terms of how their body shows up. There's pelvic movement things we look at. And again, this is all comfortable stuff for a kid in regards to that. And some kids get uncomfortable with this because it's somebody different touching them, that's around them, that's foreign to them. So that's just kind of a normal thing. But as kids understand this is part of a kind of a normal routine for them in some cases, they get pretty comfortable with it as well too. So simple with that. Some easy things we typically do is just some, like for example, some upper back mobilization things. Kids' heads are really heavy relative to the body size, so they get a lot of issues up in the top. We'll just do some easy light stuff from that perspective. Like hip related things, and I'm not really gonna do anything too crazy with it. It was just adjusted here just recently, but we'll check pelvic movement here as well too. Like one side versus the other side, how does that work? And that mobility of that, like when they fall in the rear ends over and over and over, these things have a tendency to get jammed up a little bit. So again, we'll do some light mobilization with this through there just to get some movement in there. And honestly, that's not much different than normal force with them. It's very comfortable for kids. And everybody always gets kind of freaked out about neck stuff and things like that. The neck stuff is pressure. It's not these big movements that we do with adults. So same thing, we just look and figure out where some of those tough spots are. And all we're doing is just a little pressure through one spot Do a little pressure. Good. And that's literally all it takes for these little people to be adjusted on there. It's nothing big, it's nothing scary. It's very simple and very effective at the same time. So hopefully that answers some questions on what an actual adjustment with the child looks like.